Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, depending on where you are, and thanks so much for joining us. Our program will begin in just a few moments, so hang in there. Good morning, everybody, and hi. Welcome to Conversations with Common Sense. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Betsy Bozdech, the Executive Editor of Reviews and Ratings at Common Sense Media. I have been with the organization for more than 14 years now, so a long-time veteran, and I lead the team that produces all of the parent-facing reviews for our website. I have also helped develop a few key programs that really tie into what we're going to be talking about today, so I'm going to go over those pretty quickly. We have our Common Sense Selection Program. That was up there for a second, went away, it'll be right back. We started this in 2014 to recognize outstanding movies, TV series, and specials with an official seal of approval and endorsement. So whenever you see that seal, you can know that the content isn't just age appropriate for kids or for families with teens, but it has the potential to spark family conversations, to entertain families of all kinds, and to really have a positive impact on society. All of our selection honorees, which also now include video games, are listed on our website. We will have links in the chat during the course. So if I mention something, you can check there to see if we are linking you off to something relevant to check out now or follow up on later. Next, in late 2015, Common Sense launched the first of its kind tagging system to highlight movies and TV shows that really promote 11 core character strengths, from communication and courage to perseverance and teamwork. We have a topic center where we gather all that together, and we have a bunch of lists that round up titles that are best for character development to help families find great content and parent resources. And then in 2017, we rolled out our positive gender representation tag to recognize titles that really go above and beyond when it comes to defying gender stereotypes, from Ferdinand to Wonder Woman. So those are all available on the Common Sense website. Please check them out, but not right now, because right now I am excited to welcome you all to this week's Conversations with Common Sense. We are here to talk about a really important, timely issue, mirrors and windows, why kids need to see themselves reflected in the media they watch. And before we jump in and I introduce all the panelists, I wanted to give a big thanks to the Children's Media Association, a wonderful professional group that helped initiate and develop today's discussion. We will hear a bit more from them later on, and we really appreciate all the important work they're doing in this field. So thanks so much, CMA. All right, now I'm going to introduce our guests. First up, we have Kim Berglund, the Executive Director, excuse me, Kim, I'm sorry, the Executive Director of Development at Disney Junior. Too much talking for me in the morning. She has overseen the development of original TV properties for Disney Junior's audience of kids ages 2 to 7. And before joining Disney Junior, was a key creative executive and the curriculum director for PBS Kids, working on award-winning series including Peg Plus Cat, Odd Squad, Super Y, Martha Speaks, The Electric Company, and Dinosaur Train. So that is quite a pedigree of shows. Welcome, Kim. We are delighted to have you. Um, Thanks for the applause, Kevin. Next up is Dr. Kevin Clark, a professor of learning technologies and the founding director for the Center of Digital Media Innovation and Diversity at George Mason University. Kevin is super experienced in this field as a children's media consultant. He has extensive experience in creative development and inclusion strategy for lots of networks and shows, streaming services, production studios, and technology and toy companies. He recently co-wrote an Arthur digital short on racism and served as a creative producer for Netflix's upcoming Bookmarks preschool series, which starts streaming just a few days from now on September 1st. It's where we'll hear more. You'll get to tell us a bit more about that in a bit too. And Stephen Pereira Wolfe is the CEO and co-founder of Encantos, an entertainment-driven edtech company that really centers diversity, equality, and inclusion at the heart of everything that they do. They were founded in 2015 and develop apps, books, and sing-along videos to help impart literacy and 21st century skills, putting an emphasis particularly on representing diverse cultures through stories and cultures. Stephen himself is an Emmy-nominated executive producer who was named by Adweek as one of the 50 most indispensable executives in marketing, media, and tech. It's always good to be named indispensable. And one of the top chief marketing technology officers. All right, so that's everybody. Welcome all. I'm so glad to have you here. Before we jump right into the meat of the conversation, I'm going to give a quick outline of today's program for everyone who's watching. We're going to talk for about half an hour or so, and then take some questions via the chat. So everybody who's watching, save your questions until you see the prompt around the 30-minute mark, and we'll do our best to get to as many as we can. So now we are ready to get started, and we are going to start with me. I'm going to give just a quick ground setting of where we are. The good news is that compared to where we were 5 or even 10 years ago, the number of diverse characters in kids shows is increasing, and the number of diverse people working on the shows is also increasing, which is great news. I just read a piece in the Hollywood Reporter a couple days ago that cited UCLA's 2019 Hollywood Diversity Report, which I think they found that about 54%, 30 out of 56 current scripted shows for kids on the major sources, Disney, Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, Netflix, have lead characters from traditionally underrepresented populations. So that's great. However, minority groups are still underrepresented on TV compared to their percentage of the US population, which leads nicely into our first question. And Kim, I will start with you. What does diversity, inclusion, and representation mean to you when it comes to kids media?
Sure. So, when I think when we think about diversity, inclusion, and representation in media, we immediately think about representation on the screen, and avoiding tokenism and showing real and authentic portrayals of people of color, people of different abilities, people of different sexual orientations. And that's extremely important, and it's what kids see on screen, but it really does go way beyond that. I think we really have to address diversity and inclusion and representation globally. So, not just on the screen, but behind the camera as well, the talent that we work with, diverse writers and creators and animators, directors, et cetera. Definitely at the executive level as well. I mean, there are so few creative executives of color in kids media. And, in a former life where I was writing and producing and actually working with Kevin Clark, and we were, pitching our shows, we're really pitching in predominantly, if not all, white spaces. So definitely that needs to change, and that hopefully that will start to change very soon. And then at other corporate levels as well, business affairs, marketing, consumer products, really anyone who has their hands in making or enhancing the content. Because really, we all have blind spots. I have many blind spots, and we need representation at all levels to really diminish those blind spots that we all have. And we need to be making decisions at all levels so that we achieve this public-facing result of authentic representation on screen, but we're also engendering a just and equitable and fair working environment for our talent too. As far as content though, I'm of the philosophy as a parent and as an executive that it's never too early to teach kids about race and racism and prejudice and how to be anti-racist, anti-sexist, anti-homophobic, and so on. And, I think we can all agree that our goal as kids media people, especially in preschool, is to teach kids to be kind and accepting and respectful and to, express themselves with confidence. And so I think we can do all of that while still being very pointed about being anti-racist and anti-homophobic, anti-sexist. So I think you can tackle a lot of those topics even in preschool. You just have to be mindful of child development.
Sure.
Showing diversity on
Yeah.
screen.
Sure. Speaking of which, Kevin, from your background in development, what does that mean to you, diversity, inclusion, and representation for kids media, and how does it change depending on the age of the kids that you're creating for?
Well, the younger the kid, I think the more important it is, because young people figure out the world based on what they see, right? And who they interact with. And so when you have young people who see certain characters often, then they begin to think, oh, those are the important characters. Those are the ones I need to pay attention to. And then they only see other characters sporadically, then they'll say, well, those characters are not that important. And so I think what we have to keep in mind as children's media creators and professionals is that what is on the screen impacts how young people see the world, right? And how the importance they place on people in the world and the authentic representation of the world. And so, for example, given the demographics of our country and even globally, when we hold up our children's media and examine it based on that, are we providing an accurate representation of how the world really is, right? And if we're not, then young people are seeing that and going out into the world and thinking that this is how it is, but it's not really that way. And so as young people get older into the tween spaces, I think it's important to help people help the tweens understand how they connect with the rest of society, how their friends, their relationships, their groups, how all of them are a part of society and helping them figure out how to fit in and how to play an active role in society. And so I think all through the development, there are opportunities for children's media creators to have a positive impact on young people. But we have to do it, as Kim said, with a sense of diversity, inclusion, and representation at all levels, not just in front of the screen, but also behind the camera.
Yeah, Stephen, would you like to add anything to this discussion about what does this mean to you, diversity, inclusion, and equity on screen?
Sure.
So
again, Stephen Wolfe Pereira, I've been, kind of at this intersection of entertainment, media, technology, education for over 25 years now. And I feel like what's really been interesting is the fact that this is the same conversation that we've been having now for decades. And so it doesn't really change. It's too much incrementalism. And I feel like all of a sudden you have this convergence where you certainly have a health crisis, you have an economic crisis, and now you actually have a social justice crisis. And I feel like when you have over 50% of kids in America today being diverse and you do not see yourself, the progress that we're making is too much of incrementalism. And so we need something transformative. And I feel like this is now a moment where we need to take control of our own narratives. I think we have to stop asking for permission so that we actually get someone from, the powers that be, that they actually greenlight something. No, I feel like we need to take control of our own stories and find ways to kind of put it out there in the world. And that was actually a lot of the inspiration behind starting Encantos. This is startup that was created by Black and Brown founders. We are a public benefit corporation, so all of our brands actually give back to the community. But for us, it was really important that we have control over the stories that we want to tell. It was really interesting when we started out because we are doing both digital and physical products. When we started to do some of our initial books, we met with all the large publishers. And the feedback that we got was, oh, there really is no market in Black and Brown communities. They don't have money. I mean, really disrespectful things. And so it was just a wake-up call that we really need to take control of this, not just in front of the camera, behind the camera, but also on the business side. And I feel like that was really the impetus behind us really hacking the system, becoming now one of the largest independent publishers focused on diversity, equality, inclusion, so that we could really have the stories being told to our communities because they want to see themselves and they are now demanding to see themselves. And so when you think about all the stories that are being told, just like Kevin was talking about, think about the history that's being taught. We kind of glamorize maybe, American history with George Washington and the cherry tree, but think about the first exposure that someone has if you're African American, and it might be about slavery. Or think about the first exposure you have if you're Hispanic and you're an illegal alien. These are the images and these are the narratives that actually permeate society, and that's where a lot of unconscious bias happens. And so it's critical that we take control as communities of color to really tell our own stories.
Yeah, I think it's a great moment for reclaiming and for claiming that time and that ownership. I was Psych, the movie came out a couple weeks ago, the second one, and James Roday announced that he was reclaiming his last name Rodriguez around that time, because he was talking about how when he was auditioning, as soon as they found out that his last name was Rodriguez, they were like, "Oh, well, you want to audition for the gang member?" And he was like, "It's insane that continues to happen." Anyway, and I know it does, and I know I'm not preaching to the choir here. All right, but thank you for all of that, everyone. And Stephen, before we go any further, I want to apologize. I had in my notes, I inverted your last name in my notes, so I introduced you incorrectly at the beginning of our conversation. I'm really sorry. So apologies for that.
It's the Latino two names. Wolfe was my father and Pereira my mother. So in Latin America, I use both last names.
Okay, well, anyway, I put them in the wrong order. Sorry about that. I'm glad to have it sorted. So we kind of touched on this a little bit. I know, Kim, in your first answer, we talked about the dangers, the risks of tokenism in media. So, I mean, what does that mean to you? And then how do we get to a place of authenticity? And how do creators produce content that's both engaging and authentic?
I think that a lot of it starts, again, behind the camera, thinking about like the writer's room and actively avoiding tokenism in the writer's room and having diversity there. And it's not even just diversity, it's like intradiversity.
Right.
So, there's that burden of all people of color to, have to like speak for all of and represent all of our people. And, I've really seen that take a toll on its talent. So, it just perpetuates the idea that we are a monolith. So really having intradiversity, and, if your protagonist is Black or Asian, or maybe has a disability, I think it's essential to populate your room with multiple people, or your staff with multiple people who have that commonality and shared experiences, but, also can reveal the nuances of those experiences, and those will show on screen. And, what happens, I've worked on several shows where the villain or antagonist is a person of color, and almost everyone else is white. And, I pointed that out to people, but I also think that there should be room to have an antagonist that's a person of color, as long as you have other people of color in the show as well. I think there's the overcompensation sometimes. There was like a phase, 15 years ago, kind of still today, where there would be that like token Black kid, or especially a boy, and he was always really good at math and science. And he was kind of like an Urkel type. And I do think that it was just kind of like, well, if we're going to show a positive, person of color, they've got to be great and, at science and math and be a genius. So it just helps to have that range, so we can tell many stories. We can see many shades of these people. We can see how they look different. And so, yeah.
Yeah. So, Stephen, Kevin, anything you wanted to weigh in on that? Like what is the authenticity, and how do you see creators? What tips do you have for creators for creating authentic content?
Yeah. So I recently heard a quote by Lorraine Hansberry, who wrote A Raisin in the Sun. And she said that in order to create something universal, you have to pay attention to the specific. And what that says to me is, oftentimes we try and, in the effort of being diverse, we create these monolithic, plain characters that appeal to everybody, right? Everybody's familiar with the ethnically ambiguous character, right? Nobody really knows what that character is. But what I think is actually the best way to do it is to actually be really, really specific, to say, this character is of Barbadian heritage, they speak 3 languages, and they love sweet potato pie. And when you can be that specific, then people will connect to various parts and aspects of that character. And that's how you create diversity and connection across groups. It's not by saying, okay, everybody's going to look similar, except some of them are going to be darker than others, and we're going to give them these stereotypical tags so that we check all the boxes. So I think it's important that we try and be specific, and Kim alluded to this, and I think Stephen too, is that you also should be diverse within groups, right? All Black people are not the same. When you talk about Latino populations, there's, Puerto Rican, Dominican, there's, you can go on and on. And I think it's important that we are that specific so that we highlight those communities.
Yeah, actually, that's Stephen. That was the question I specifically had for you, is that I know that when it comes to the representation of Latino people in the media, the language we use to refer to different communities matters a lot. And along with physical features and story elements, language can really help validate kids' identities. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would actually zoom out, and if Kevin's gonna share that awesome quote, I'll also share a quote in honor of one of our advisors and an inspiration to Encantos, actually Sir Ken Robinson, who just passed last week. The famed and beloved educator, and he spoke about how human beings are naturally diverse and different. And I feel like when it comes to understanding that diversity, we actually do a disservice when you just kind of have everything into a diversity and inclusion bucket. Just think about where we are right now. I am a proud Dominican American, born and raised in New York, but all my family is, still in Santo Domingo. And when, kind of Black Lives Matter after George Floyd hit, I feel like everyone started talking about diversity, but it was really important that this was a Black Lives Matter moment, and that we really focus on that community and the pain that they were going through. And so when you understand, to your point about being specific, Kevin, I think it's really important that you actually see that through across all different dimensions of communities, of characters, but more importantly, of the stories that you're trying to tell. I love the whole notion that we all talk about Hispanic, but there is no Hispanic community, right? That is a term that was invented by the US Census. And if you speak to anyone in Spanish, you use the word Latino or Latina, because that's actually from a language perspective. And if you think of where we are today, almost 30% of kids in America are Latino, or as they start to affectionately call it, Latinx, so that it's more gender neutral. But within that, there's such incredible diversity, because if 20% of the US population today is Hispanic, you actually have 2/3 of that being of Mexican origin. And then certainly on the East Coast, it's much more, Caribbean centric with Puerto Rican and Cuban and Dominican. And obviously on the West Coast, more Central American and Mexican. But I feel like we are now at a moment where you're seeing everyone really say, I want to be seen. And that is part of the reason why when we develop our stories, when we're having diverse creators tell the stories that they want to tell and they want to see out in the world, it is very specific. And when we do everything from whether it's canticos with our beloved bilingual nursery rhymes that are authentically told in English and Spanish, or our Tiny Travelers brand, which is all about literally celebrating how to be a citizen of the world. And we're doing literally every country from around the world. This is the kind of thing where we were told by large publishers when we first told about the concept, well, just do the popular countries. Just do Italy and France. No, we actually want to see every country. That's part of the whole issue. You don't see these people because you don't understand them. And if you've never seen Nigeria, if you've never seen, Haiti, if you've never seen, Colombia, you're not going to know. And so this is a moment where we can build bridges, and the language actually plays a huge role in it.
Yeah, that's great. So we've talked about being specific. We've talked about having a diversity of diversities in the room. Are there any other strategies and practices that you think creators can use to encourage this kind of production? Anybody who raise your hand, jump in.
Sure. Well, I'll say just, kind of running our own company, I think we're really proud that we are going to be the home for diversity, equality, inclusion. It's literally into the DNA of the company, and we started it as a public benefit corporation. So I feel like our whole mission is very different. And when you have a firm that is also female-owned, 90% female, and we actually have all diverse, kind of creatives, which, by the way, includes white, right? Like, it's not just all Black and brown. We really want to have, that level of inclusion. But I would say the biggest tip that I could give to any creator is own your audience. All of the tools are now there. You can go direct. There is a revolution that is happening where everything is going to be direct to consumer in one way or another. And so think about Disney, how they upended their whole company to go direct to consumer, and now they are winning through Disney Plus, right? I mean, just imagine, if that was not done, and where they would be right now during a pandemic. But this is not just unique to, streaming. This is literally every single industry, every single company, every single consumer experience will go direct in some way, shape, or form. And if you're a creator, the best thing that you can do is to just put something out there. All the platforms exist, whether it's YouTube, whether it's social, but find a way to go direct and build an audience. And with that audience comes power, because you know your audience. And once you actually have that engagement, no one can take that away from you.
Anything you'd add, Kevin or Kim? Or if we want to talk about, are there any examples that you would like to share with the people watching today of shows and creation or creative properties that are really doing this right? I know we talked the other day about a couple of examples that we all liked a lot. So you want to go ahead, Kevin?
Yeah. So I mean, I'll talk about a series that I just finished working on that's going to be out on September 1st with Netflix, called Bookmarks. And here's a series that features African-American authors, and they're telling their stories from their experience. And then you have prominent Black celebrities and artists who are telling those stories to young people. And what it does is that it creates a forum or a platform for kids around the world to see themselves. And this is what Stephen was talking about, to see themselves and to see their community represented. And so for me, that would be one example. And I totally agree with his sentiment that people just need to start making stuff. Just start putting it out there.
Yep. Kim, are there any examples from Disney or other? I know we mentioned, we talked quite a bit about Doc McStuffins the other day when we were prepping for this. If you want to talk about that, or any others that you think are really doing a good job of this?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we have to shout out Doc McStuffins because it has been just so impactful in the world. And, it really is the epitome of, if you can see it, you can be it. And I do think that Doc is most often used as the exemplar for preschool on shifting the paradigm for people of color, especially girls and women of African-American girls and women. But, the one thing I have to say is that, I, again, have been on a lot of panels, and as Stephen was saying, 7-8 years ago, we were talking about Doc McStuffins, and that was kind of used as the only example. And so I feel like if we are still using this as the only example 2 or 3 years from now, maybe we aren't moving. Well, we definitely aren't moving fast enough to bring more representation and breaking barriers on the screen. But it's still such a wonderful show. Another show that just launched in March on Disney Junior is Mira Royal Detective, and it's such a special show. It has really gained a lot of popularity since its premiere just a few months ago. It's an animated mystery adventure series for preschoolers, and it's inspired by the cultures and customs of India. And the entire cast is voiced by South Asian and Asian actors. It is animated at a studio called Technicolor, which is in Bangalore, India. We work closely with a consulting producer. We have South Asian writers in the room. And it's just such a delightful and beautiful show. So I really encourage people to check it out. So I think it's great. There are a lot of other ones too, like Amphibia and Owl House, which are for 6 to 11-year-olds. But
and I know we all were talking about how Molly of Denali on PBS has been a great example of a recent show. But Kim, that reminded me that you made a really great point when we were talking the other day about the value of both shows that are driven by topicality and cultural themes, and those that aren't, but still center on diverse characters and experiences. And I was hoping you could elaborate on that the way we were talking about it the other day. I think in kids media and publishing, we, need shows and stories that are very topical and that are explicitly imparting information about culture and different cultural themes. We all need to be educated on other worlds and
and cultures and societies. And so those are what we kind of call like important shows, or some people call important shows. But I think just as important are shows, and I don't want to downplay those shows because they are very important. But just as important are shows that are with diverse protagonists and characters where kids are just being kids. My very favorite children's book is Corduroy, because the girl looked like me and the mom looked like my mom. And it's just about a girl who wants a toy. So let's have more shows like that, And, I think that you, again, as Kevin was mentioning about cultural specificity being really important. You have to have shows that are all about very universal themes of childhood, but you still bring that cultural specificity to the characters. Because the thing you don't want is, you don't want marginalized kids to think that they're only important in these like very special episodes or shows only directing or directly addressing, cultural topics. Like we exist beyond those topics.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's important to, based on what Kim said, sometimes, a lot of times, you just want to be a human being, right? I always joke with my wife and I say, okay, I'm going out. I'm going to be Black Kevin today, right? Because I got to go out and do the diversity thing. And sometimes I just want to be Kevin, right? A husband, a father, a guy who's bad at basketball. I mean, I want to be that. And not have it, have some unwritten thing, scrolling below me saying, oh, here are all the things he's overcome. Here's all the things that he can do as a Black man. And I think we will make great strides when we start creating content that can present all kids and all communities just as who they are. And there's not kind of this subtext that we're checking a box or we're presenting these hero stories. Not that they're not important, but you have to create, as we said before, diversity within the diversity so that you can just show people being human beings.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Anything
Betsy, I mean, like, and first off, like, I'm huge fans of, both Kim and Kevin, and this is not taking anything away from the stuff that exists out there. But I also feel like we need to have a real conversation of the stories that are being told and who is actually telling them. I mean, Doc McStuffins was, developed by, the amazing Chris Nee. And, it was really just kind of a female doctor, but it wasn't created by an African-American woman, right? Or, it wasn't, kind of initially thought of that. And when you think about, kind of these stories, the content that's being developed, it's usually not being led by someone of color. I mean, I love, Mita, Royal Detective, but, I think it was Becca Topol, whose wife is an amazing, screenwriter. She's, kind of like the lead, and it was developed, by an animation, a production studio that actually is in Burbank, right? And so I feel like we're at this moment where how do you not only kind of create a character and tell a story, but also then own it as well? And I feel like one of the things that really isn't spoken about in the industry is that there are really no kind of either characters, stories, series, properties that are developed that are actually owned by people of color. And so that's great that you get to work for these large companies that are, certainly behemoths, but when Coco was made, or Black Panther, or any of these other, kind of, incredible, films or series or whatever, the rents, the profits, the ownership isn't going to the community. And I feel like this is now a moment that we need to own our stories. We want a creator that is going to create something to also own it and benefit. And when you actually see something like Doc McStuffins, make billions of dollars in consumer products and licensing, it'd be great that actually goes to, someone that is of color that created that story. And I feel like that is a little bit of our approach, because we are independent, because we actually own our own IP. We actually have creators that are benefiting from this. So I feel like it really is going through the full value chain. And I feel like it's now this moment of reckoning where creators of color, they want to also not just tell the story, they want to own the story as well.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
No,
I agree with you, Stephen. Go, Kim.
Go.
No.
No, I was just going to say, I absolutely agree. I totally agree. And I think that, at many different companies, I'm very appreciative of Chris Nee and of Becca Topol, who are using their platform and going in deep. But I totally agree. And, I think that there are a lot of companies that have thought of like, oh, maybe we'll take a risk on this diverse creator. And one of my colleagues on our development team was like, don't think of it as taking a risk. This is an opportunity to grow our team, grow like our knowledge, and not just an opportunity for them, it's for everyone. And so I absolutely agree with what you're saying. And we are finally seeing, and at Disney for sure, an increase in diverse creators. Like they were always out there, they're always creators, but now they're just getting opportunities. But, one thing to note is that development, especially in animation, takes time. So I'm very antsy right now because, it could be 3 to 4 years plus before you see anything on the screen. But we also want to give those projects the space and the time that all projects need to develop and incubate. So, we are exploring, I think we all have to explore different ways of releasing content that can bring these ideas to the screen faster. And then also just developing the talent more and finding opportunities on current shows so that they get that face time, that recognition, and like can move up faster. So I absolutely agree with what you were saying, Stephen.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I agree. And I think it should be both and, right? Mm-hmm. We need more Black creative executives in these large companies because these large companies have huge reach and they're global. And we also need to have creators of color at the grassroots level making content and pushing those large companies to put out more authentic content. So I totally agree with where you're coming from.
That's great. Well, thank you all. That's an excellent point. We are now at the time in our chat where we need to take some audience questions. Just before we do that, I was just going to say, parents always ask me how they can find great media like the shows we've been talking about today and the ones that are upcoming. Hopefully there's lots more in the pipeline. So we have all kinds of resources on the Common Sense Media website, from lists of our Common Sense selection titles to editors' picks lists, as well as character and gender lists around the tags that we've developed for those. So we'll have those links in the chat. And I know that all of you have upcoming projects you're excited about. Kevin, you talked to us about bookmarks. Kim, you've talked to us about Mira and Owl House. Anything else that you want to mention? And Stephen, you told me about something coming up, a cooking show, I think.
Yes. So again, very much inspired by Doc McStuffins, but we're creating something called Issa's Edible Adventures. And so think of this as a Black and Indian 7-year-old little girl. It'll be an animated series. And, we're all about teaching 21st century learning, literacy, and life skills. So this series was actually supposed to be launched or, kind of revealed next year. But because of COVID and everyone's obviously at home cooking, we decided to accelerate it and we introduced it. So you could go to issalovesfood.com to get a little preview. The creator is an incredible woman, went to Columbia Business School and worked in finance. And then she became this award-winning celebrity chef. Her name is Aaliyah Lee Kong. And she has, told this amazing story of Issa, which goes around the world, learning and teaching about food and cooking, ingredients, and, the science of nutrition. And then also helps people connect and learn about culture through food. Like fun fact, tomatoes are not from Italy, they're from Mexico. Or in Japan, kids have miso soup for breakfast. So this is something where we will announce who the partner is in the fall, but it's just been picked up by a very large streamer. And again, the benefit is here that we get to bring these stories to life in an authentic way.
Great. Anything else you, Kim or Kevin, you wanted to say about the shows we've been talking about, or anything else in the pipeline before we jumped into the questions? Okay, great. Well, it sounds like there's a lot of good stuff out there for everyone to find, and hopefully they will. And now we are going to take a couple of audience questions. We have Alex Washington asking, how do we get more diversity behind the camera? Because if you don't come in without years of experience or an internship, it's really difficult, and many will lose confidence and pivot to another industry. So Kim or Steven, you guys work, I mean, all of you work directly with creators. Anybody have any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, that is a huge problem.
Yeah.
That is a complaint of like, well, I don't have the experience, so I can't get the job, but then I don't have the job to get more experience, and it just like it's this awful vicious cycle. I definitely think that we're finding ways to bring more talent in, and again, it's not a risk. Changing the mindset of that it is not a risk to bring people on who are not experienced. Like everyone is not like no one is experienced when they first start, but there are certain people who just get that opportunity to grow and elevate faster. So again, changing the mindset that it's not a risk. You're bringing someone on. There's a certain level of mentorship. We need to have mentorship programs built into our teams. And, we're also coming up, with projects where, I mean, this is a really big priority of mine, where they are kind of scrappier, faster. We can bring a team in, and I really want to make sure that we are bringing in new talent, and then we're giving that storyboard artist who is just like that they can direct, but haven't gotten that opportunity. We bring them on and have them direct, a segment or, a short or something. So I think it's really important for the teams, any team, to get together and try and figure out how can we mentor better? How can we, elevate using, what are the strategies and content strategies we can create to bring up more talent of color?
Yeah. One thing that I would also add is people should create these networks. And one thing that has been helpful for me, I mean, I've advised, I've consulted, I've done a whole bunch of things. Sometime I got paid, sometime I didn't. And so I was fortunate that I have a day job as a professor. And some people can't not work for no money. But I think if you are part of a network where people know what you can do and what you want to do, then that is helpful, so that when people hear things, they'll say, oh, you should talk to this guy, or you should talk to this woman. So I think being part of a network is one thing that I would suggest.
Yeah. Well, and that's where the Children's Media Association can come in handy, certainly, depending on I know they have the biggest group is in New York, but there are also chapters in the Bay Area and Los Angeles. And I know that has been really, really great for up and comers. And they've actually launched a new mentorship program. I'm mentoring someone in it. So that's been exciting. So that's really cool.
Yeah, Betsy, if I may, and again, I absolutely agree with what Kim and Kevin said, but nothing with respect to them. I feel like we need to have real talk, right? So my advice would be two things. One, we are over-mentored and we are under-invested as a community. So let's just have real talk, right? Because I've now worked in finance, I've worked in technology, I've worked in media, I've worked in advertising, and I've always heard about, you don't have the right experience, and it probably over-indexes with women, right? Or maybe women think that, oh, I need to, check all these boxes, but men are usually not as smart as women, and so we just kind of jump into it and we'll maybe get the role. But usually it might be a white man getting that opportunity or getting that shot. And so I do feel that there is unconscious bias in this area. And so I would say we have to stop mentoring. We have to start investing in talent. And again, this is the incrementalism. Like, we are never going to get to where we are as a population. Again, 50+% of kids in America today are diverse. And so this is not about mentoring anymore. I'm over it. Like, this is a moment where we need to invest in the talent. And if folks don't understand that, that's why we created Encantos. Come to Encantos, Alex, right? Like, we are open. We are all about diverse founders. We are all about diverse storytellers. We are going to be the house of ideas for the next generation, right? If you look at this as the multicultural movement that we are seeing across our country, time is up in terms of waiting for that shot. It is not going to happen with that incremental approach. We want to take a shot on those talented creators that want to tell those stories. So come to us.
All right, I think, thank you all. I think we had another question on deck from CJ Bolin. What do you think of stories where nobody's race is specified, yet readers assume they're all white? I have noticed this becomes an issue like in the Hunger Games when the time to adapt those stories on screen. So that's sort of like everyone, you know, like I've heard this talked about a lot. Like when you are the dominant culture, you just sort of assume everybody in a story is the same as you. And then everybody gets all outraged when Hermione is black or Rue is black. And I mean, so what do you think about that?
I think you get good writers. I mean, it's, you know, a story is a story, right? And if you want to make the characters black or diverse, that can be done. I mean, I don't necessarily think that some characters should own a particular race, right? And so I think if you have a good writing staff and you can create a good story, then it really shouldn't matter.
Yeah, but I would say, you know, this also ties into unconscious bias, where you know, people will assume something, and I feel like this is just another opportunity for us to have diverse storytellers tell the stories that they want to tell. Again, Kevin just wants to be Kevin, right? He doesn't want to represent all black people on the planet, right? Like maybe he just wants to, you know, be a professor, right? And so I feel like there is an opportunity for us to, you know, really have the diverse storytellers tell the stories the way they see it without all the tweaking, right? Without, you know, kind of some executive over their shoulder saying, well, what if you just do this? You know, I'll give you a quick story. We actually have our #1 bilingual preschool brand, Canticos, which is, you know, all about, you know, kind of getting kindergarten readiness. It's in English and Spanish. You know, we have all these free resources for kids and parents and educators if you go to canticosworld.com. But when we were creating the characters, one of the characters is a bunny. And one of the early folks that we started talking to, they were like, you know what, we really love the bunny character, but it'd be great if you make the bunny white. And the bunny happens to be brown. And so this was one of our most popular characters. This transcends because, you know, either if you're Hispanic, you love Canticos because it's culturally authentic and the nursery rhymes that you grew up with. If you're not Hispanic, you just want your kids to learn another language because being bilingual makes you smarter. But the fact that someone was like, if you could just make this bunny white, and we're like, well, first off, bunnies in nature are mostly brown. So that's just science. But two, this resonates with our black and brown fans. And we're not going to make it a white rabbit. It's going to be a brown rabbit. And so it goes back to really owning the story and having that control.
All right. Well, I think we have time for one last question, which is from Jorby Williams. And it says, can we talk specifically about shows for tweens and teens? It seems there's a dearth of shows for this age group. So I guess that's pretty open. Can we talk about them? Yes, we can talk about them. And I agree as an editor at Common Sense. I mean, it has been my experience over the years I've been here that there is a gap that could be filled for these older kids. There's so much great content for preschoolers, and then teens just jump into the adult world. But that middle ground, it's hard to do well, but when you do it well, it's so good. And what do you guys think? What do you guys have to say about that age group?
I think there are some great shows, but like I had talked about Amphibia and Owl House. Right. Also, I love Craig of the Creek on Cartoon Network. But I agree. And I think I'm kind of putting my writer hat on, and I'm sure that Kevin is nodding his head as well, that we've gone out there to pitch shows for, you know, that the tween audience, teen kind of young adult. And I think that there's a lot of times people are like, we just want to make them laugh and have these like funny kind of multi-camera sitcom shows. And I think that, you know, those are great and they're fun, but they have a little bit of a gloss to them. And, you know, I would love to see more single camera comedic shows, but like a little bit more real. It could be a dramedy. And, you know, I loved Andy Mack, and I think, you know, that was so popular. And so when I was, you know, not an executive in writing, I was really looking at that as kind of the you know, the model to tell really rich and very authentic stories. And so I would love to see more of that, but there's been a little bit of resistance over the past few years for that, and hopefully that will change.
Yeah, I think we've seen some positive steps toward that format with the Babysitters Club and Gordon Gibbons and Ghostwriter and all these things that are a little bit more, less sort of traditional sitcom-y. And I think that you're right, that's a trend. But I think it's an opportunity then too to show a lot more mirrors and windows to kids in this space as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that if you look at kind of the bifurcation, let's call it traditional media on one hand, and then certainly the streaming, over the top platforms, it's very divergent. And I would say that most kids, whether they admit it or not, whether we like it or not, they're going to YouTube to find these stories, right? They're going to YouTube to fill the gap. And that's just, again, it's all about audience. And so when you see someone that is on TikTok and then they start their YouTube channel and they have, millions and millions, if not billions of views, I just feel that kids are always going to find something where they can see themselves. And if it's not being supplied in a traditional way, they will find new ways. And that's where the platforms are truly democratic in that sense. Again, it all goes back to owning your audience. For Encantos, we really focus on kids 12 and under, right? We really want to understand kind of, preschool, younger kids, call it 5 to 8, and then older kids kind of, 9 to 12. And we actually are getting tons of inbound from different streamers that are looking for that 9 to 12 tween market. So that is an area of a huge focus and opportunity.
All right, so creators, listen up. There's a gap. Jump in. All right. Well, everybody, believe it or not, our time is up. I want to thank Kevin, Kim, and Stephen so much for joining us for this really important, timely conversation. I also want to give a huge thanks to the Children's Media Association and the Children's Media Association Bay Area for helping bring this conversation forward. And we are going to we have a quick message from the CMA to show right now.
Hi, I'm Donna Mitra. I'm here to tell you about the Children's Media Association. CMA is a national, nonprofit, all-volunteer-run community of makers, thinkers, and innovators committed to excellence and diversity in children's media. CMA's mission is to educate, innovate, and connect. Please join us at childrensmediaassociation.org. You'll be glad you did. Our mission is served by events such as this one that brings us together to learn and be inspired about the importance and challenges of providing media that is diverse, authentic, and inclusive. Thank you for joining us.
I couldn't agree more. Donna was the spark who got this event going, so we give her a big round of virtual applause. I have time for one quick last plug to check out Common Sense for all of our great resources, including everything I mentioned before, but also I wanted to call out, we have our Wide Open School, which is available in both English and Spanish, and is free resources for everyone who is wrangling that distance and remote learning right now. There are a lot of us, a lot of you, we are here for you. Please check out wideopenschool.org, English and Spanish. And I just want to thank everyone again. Thank you all so much to our panelists. You guys, that was one of the best conversations we've had. It's so timely. It could not matter more, I think. And we're hoping that all these kids are going to take all this stuff that we are making for them, and it's going to help change the world. So thank you. I hope that everyone who's watching today will mark their calendars for next week's Conversations with Common Sense. I'm not hosting it, but somebody else will be. It's Thursday, September 3rd, and the topic is Race and Education, Teaching in Support of Black Lives. So also a really important, timely conversation. If anyone would like to share this session with other parents and caregivers, you will be able to find it on the Common Sense website, as well as our YouTube channel. And to make sure you don't miss any future live conversations, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the notification bell to stay informed. So thank you so much to everyone for joining us. And that we are a wrap for today. So bye.
Thank you, Betsy.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Betsy.
Thanks, everyone.
Nice meeting you, Steve.
Take care.
Wide Open School is an easy-to-use online resource to support families and teachers in a school year unlike any other. Get advice, tips, and how-tos about distance learning in the Family and Teacher Center. You'll find a daily plan with free learning activities to keep kids engaged. Handpicked by the experts at Common Sense. Learn from anywhere. Join us at wideopenschool.org.